Hello there, everyone, and welcome once again to the Soldiers of Cinema podcast. I'm Clark Coffey, and with me, as always, is Mr. Cullen McFader. Hello, Cullen. How you doing?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing excellent, man. I'm excited for episode 31, where we're going to discuss The Silence of the Lambs. I kind of wanted to say Silence of the Ham. I don't know where I got into calling this movie Silence of the Ham.
I mean, they do say that pork is the most similar texture to human skin.
You would go there. I was actually going to talk about Anthony Hopkins' performance as Dr. Lecter, but...
We clearly have two different wavelengths.
yeah, exactly. Oh my gosh.
No, I'm really excited for this. This is one of my...
too.
Favorite movie, probably in my top 5 favorite movies of all time. I'm a very big fan of Silence of the Lambs. It very much influences a lot of my work, from beyond just genre, I think.
Absolutely. Well, I had forgotten what a huge, critical darling this was when it came out in 1991. Mm-hmm. Obviously, so many aspects of this film have kind of seeped into the pop culture and the cultural lexicon. Anthony Hopkins' performance, Ted Levine's performance. I mean, it puts the lotion on its skin. I mean, come on, these things.
Lotion in the basket.
I mean, so. No doubt a huge film, and I had kind of forgotten, some of that. I go back to 1991, and we could kind of start our discussion of this by sharing our personal experiences with the film, our personal initial experiences with the film, and it's always kind of fun again because you and I are a bit apart in age. We're about 20 years apart in age, so we come to these films at different times. And so in 1991, I'll just age myself here. I was in high school. And I don't remember seeing the film at the theater, although it's possible I did, but I definitely remember seeing this, on video soon thereafter, right when it came to video. I remember it being a huge film. I remember it being a big deal. It was all over the place. And I remember enjoying the film when I saw it, when it was in its first kind of release there, but not being especially captivated or blown away or mesmerized by it. Certainly recognized it was a good film, but I don't think it had the same impact on me as it had on you. But yeah, I mean, it was, geez, this thing is grossed $272 million, is the fifth highest box office of that year. I mean, like you had mentioned just a second ago, I mean, my goodness, how many Oscars did this thing win? It won all.
Yeah, it won all big 5. Yeah,
won the big 5.
Yeah.
Huge deal. But
it was only, I think, the third or fourth movie to do that. Wasn't
I think the third at that time.
Yeah. And so, I mean, for me, what I think is really interesting is that this is actually, just before I get into like my personal experience, what I think is really kind of neat is that this is a huge movie for my generation for some reason. Even though I was born 7 years after this came out in '98.
That's so odd.
But like everyone I know that's my age, film enthusiasts or not, really love this movie. Like even the most casual people that like aren't really into movies, they know this movie, they love it, and I don't know why that is, but it really for some reason has a huge impact on my generation.
Yeah.
But I saw it probably the first time in the early 2010s when I was probably in like grade 9, I think was when I first watched it. And I remember being kind of concerned because it was a movie that I'd heard so much about. Like my dad used to do that, that when I would be trying to go to sleep at night. There's like, of course, it's one of those things that's it's hyped up beyond belief before you get to it. And I loved it. I remember watching it and being kind of concerned that I wasn't going to like it as much and that it was just going to kind of not live up to the hype. But I've always, there's been something that, I don't know, just really, I don't want to say like speaks to me because of course it's a movie about cannibals, but
well, I mean, you did start off talking about
it's one of those movies that's kind of funny that I'm sure you've had these experiences too, where you watch a movie and you kind of go like, those choices are my choices. If I was directing this, I would make all of the same choices that I mean, obviously, I don't think I'm as talented of a filmmaker as Jonathan Demme, but one of those things that I just agree with every choice that's made. Like, there's not a moment in this movie that I go like, that could be done differently. And I think that that's really interesting to me because I again, whenever I get a movie like that, it is just a lovely feeling to fall in love with a movie like that. But also, just the idea like that this movie, again, as I mentioned briefly earlier, it had like influenced me so much that, you know, the movie that I made for Herzog's Masterclass was really inspired by Silence of the Lambs. In fact, I even stole an audio bite from Lecter saying tick tock, tick tock, tick tock, and used it in my Herzog movie.
I love it. And the film that you're working on now is inspired,
the film
right?
that I'm working on right now, and that's what I mean when I sort of say that it's not like a genre dependent thing where it's like I'm sitting here going, oh, I'm making a serial killer movie.
Right.
That's not it at all. It's more just the way that I think just the style and way in which Demme handles like the screenplay and the way that he shoots things and Tak Fujimoto's cinematography are just, to me, like really stunning and really beautiful, to the point that I can't help but, you know, pull from it.
Yeah.
So, and for example, that the big finale, I'm not going to spoil it because of course the movie's not even shot yet.
Spoil? But, your film. You're talking about your film. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Not
I was like, I don't think you have to worry about spoiler alerts for Silence of the Lambs.
Yeah. But no, it is 30 this year, isn't it?
Yeah, it's mind blowing. Yeah. I feel so old. I feel so old.
But which scares me because I'm only 7 years younger than this movie, so that means I'm 7 years to 30. But
yeah.
But I you know, the finale for the movie that I'm working on right now, I remember having a lot of trouble coming up with exactly what I wanted to do with it. And I had a general idea of, you know, initially the movie, I can sort of say this because the movie now is so different from its original drafts, like it's almost completely unrecognizable. But it was very inspired by Texas Chainsaw Massacre initially, in that was kind of what I was going for the finale. This like adrenaline-fueled, visceral, you know, violent, gory, exciting, very grindhousey kind of feel.
Yeah.
And but what I kind of realized, and as much as I love Texas Chainsaw, like that, I never really felt a huge following for those movies as I grew up. I didn't really, you know, as much as I like those movies now, they didn't really inspire me or affect me growing up. Whereas something like this really did, and so I kind of decided to take the movie and really transform it into something that was a lot more similar to the finale of this, which is, you know, there's no jump scares in this finale. It's very like her walking around the basement is very slow. It's very methodical. It's very well thought out. You know, there's no scary music going on as it happens. There's no skeletons falling out of closets and things like that. But it's, you know, I think a lot of people say that it's one of the most terrifying endings of a movie because it's just so suspenseful. It's
well, I want to work up to that. I want to work up to that because
yes, of course, yeah. We'll get to the finale.
You and I
later.
you and I will have some different opinions a little bit on this, and so it's going to be fun.
Yes,
but of course, I totally appreciate and respect that this film is one that has inspired you, and sometimes it's like, you know, it was the right film at the right time. We can't explain why. I mean, look, there's been some films that. It's like I can't explain to you why necessarily The Road Warrior, a film that we discussed in the last episode, was such a profoundly important touchstone for me as a kid. I could describe all these aspects of the film itself to you, but look, the reality is like some films really speak to us and some films not so much. And that's perfectly wonderful, of course. But I mean, let's kind of jump in then and discuss some of the aspects of this film. It'll be fun to see kind of where we might, you know, share some thoughts about it and where we're going to have some different thoughts about it. So now let's kind of talk about the writing a little bit, because I think there's a couple really interesting, significant aspects of this film that kind of originate in the writing. I mean, you know, right off the bat, I think it's obvious we see some things here that are different than a lot of films that were released in that era. We have a woman as a main protagonist. And usually in these kind of, I don't know what would you even call, I mean, it's kind of part horror, it's part kind of
thriller, psychological,
it's
kind of police procedural almost. I mean, and very much in line with that too, what you kind of like the differences between that, you know, a lot of people don't know that it's also a sequel to sort of like an unofficial sequel, but it's a sequel to Manhunter by Michael Mann. And again, I think all those differences that you just mentioned there very much come up. Like if you watch those two movies back to back, Manhunter's much more of a traditional, you know, male cop hunting down a serial killer, very 80s in a lot of ways.
Right. But even in the 90s, we don't have a lot of women protagonists. In these type of films. So that's obviously a big deal. And I think, and more than just that it's a protagonist is a woman, I mean, we see this a lot throughout the film, that the film is really highlighting the male gaze. It's highlighting her. We have a handful of scenes that really illustrate the differences of her as a woman. Being in a man's world, and we see this very visually, symbolically, of her getting into the elevator with half a dozen men who are twice as tall as her. Jodie Foster seems to be perhaps a petite person.
Yeah.
We have where all the state troopers are in the room surrounding her, and kind of, we see a lot of men kind of look her up and down and objectify her,
or just completely lose respect, like have no respect for her. Don't
have no respect for her. We have,
which is in stark contrast to something like that came out in the same year as well, Terminator 2, which of course has a female protagonist, but in a very different way. And Jodie Foster actually has commented on this in the past too, which is this idea that Clarice isn't a female hero that's taking the male tropes and just applying them to a woman character where she's like big, strong. She's very much embodied in her femininity.
It's not a woman trying to be a man, for example. I guess, or presented. I mean, it's right.
She's
like
vulnerable and she's real. She feels like a real person. In a lot of ways.
It's interesting, different ways to. Of course, it's not that certainly a woman can be like Linda Hamilton and be physically imposing and have all these characteristics. But just a different way to represent that.
It was kind of the first time that a movie had done that a movie hadn't portrayed a character like Linda Hamilton in T2, which was like that. You think of even another James Cameron movie like Ripley in Aliens or something like that, which is still, again, very much going for
action-oriented.
Action hero, kind of like, just a female Schwarzenegger or like something like that.
Yeah.
Whereas this was one of the first movies, and at least I can think of, that really embraced, that had a female protagonist in a movie that wasn't like a rom-com or a romance or a drama, that it was like a thriller. It was a serial killer police movie. But our main character is a woman who is vulnerable, who has a lot of insecurities and things like that, and has trouble really imposing herself on the scene. And especially, I think one of the moments that really highlights that in this film as well is when when Crawford says to the guys, let's have this conversation kind of out of the earshot of the woman. And then she says afterwards to him, you don't, these guys pick up on that, and they'll continue to, see you.
The film really calls that out. The film's not afraid to call these things out and illustrate the unique challenges that a woman might have in this position. Absolutely. And I of course, I don't think that was something I noticed nearly as much when I watched this film the first time, when I was, whatever that was, 15 years old or something. But certainly I particularly noticed that this time around. Something else that I found was different in that. Oh, go ahead. Sorry, if you've got another.
And this actually might be sort of similar to what you were going to say, but that I find that what's another thing that's interesting about that idea is that there's kind of, every villain in this movie or every antagonist in this movie embodies some sort of sexist behavior, which I think is really interesting.
Well, that was what I was going to talk about, but at an even higher level, that this film has, to me, what seems to be multiple antagonists. That's actually something so even a step back further than where you were even going to start at. So to my mind, and I think it's one of the things that makes this film so memorable to people. And I think it's one of the things that makes this film as strong a film as it is, right? We hear constantly this idea that, a story is only as good, a film is only as good as its antagonist. A protagonist is only as good as the antagonist. And here we actually have at least a couple, and I might make an argument for maybe 3 or 2.5 really good antagonists. And they're very different. They're unique in the threats that they present in certain ways. But you've got, of course, Dr. Lecter, portrayed by Anthony Hopkins, and of course, it's extremely memorable antagonist, and he's really built up in this film to be this just almost like magically dangerous, that he can, that he can get out of the situations that he gets out of and do the thing. I mean, he's, the way, and we can talk about this, the way the film presents him, so that we as an audience are feel threatened by him and are aware of his danger.
Even when he's behind 6 inches of glass.
Even when he's behind 6 inches of glass and he's in steel cages and he's got mouth guards on. I mean, he's just such a terrifying figure. And then, of course, we have Buffalo Bill, a completely different type of antagonist.
Yeah.
And then I would even argue, that even Dr. Chilton is a little bit of an antagonist. In a totally different way, that he's inside the system. I think he's kind of presented somewhat as a sexual predator, certainly as a misogynist, certainly as an obstacle to Clarice, our protagonist. And so, maybe half of an antagonist or something, but definitely interesting.
And I do think it's neat to kind of compare to again with Manhunter, because it is the same. It is basically the same cast of characters and the same story, except it's Crawford is the main character of Manhunter, but Crawford in Manhunter has to go and interview Lecter to find a serial killer. That's what that movie is. So it's pretty much an identical plot. It's just that you really, I think, come to appreciate the subtlety, I think, of Silence of the Lambs a lot more when you watch Manhunter as well, because of exactly what you're talking about, which is that this idea that it's, a villain doesn't have to be the killer. You can have an antagonist in it that is technically on the side of our hero. And I would even go as far to say, too, that there's elements of Crawford that sort of make him, in certain moments, antagonistic to Clarice. Every male character in this movie in a lot of ways is sort of portrayed with an unease. And even the guy that brings her to the storage lot and like helps her open the garage, you kind of feel like uneasy about him. Or the guys that she goes to talk about the moths with, like they're kind of goofy and stuff, but they still, like, the first thing they do is hit on her.
That's true.
So I think it's really interesting in this movie that you get this perfect comparison to a previous movie done by a different director, same book series based off of very similar plots, but you really get to see kind of how the movie is elevated by introducing this element of not only is this character hunting a serial killer and having to talk to this, psychoanalytical, mind warping serial killer like Lecter, but on top of that, she's a woman in a man's world, and she's got to deal with this slew of, and this onslaught of whether it's just underestimation or whether it's active harassment, or
objectification,
it's her about to be murdered.
Yeah.
You get all these different elements that very much play into that.
So what do you think? Let's talk about Buffalo Bill and Dr. Lecter a little bit. I mean, these are two characters and two performances that have well outlived the film. I mean, these are both of these performances and characters entered into kind of the public domain, the pop culture, if you will. And I mean, just about everybody can at least like recite a line, the fava beans, or, the puts the lotion in the basket, or I mean, And there's some interesting things, I think, to kind of to analyze, think about, and discuss about these two characters. They're really what makes the film. I mean, I feel like Jodie Foster, like many films like this, is a little bit of a blank canvas. Now, it's interesting that we do have an arc for her, and I think much more so than a lot of films like this, she does have an arc, and because of her relationship and interactions with Lecter, we do learn about her backstory, which I think is unique to this film. A lot of times the hero doesn't have as much of that in a film like this.
Yeah, they kind of try to make them sort of more a projection of
the
viewer.
audience, and it's much more about the antagonist and their kind of, right? But so I think that's one of the other aspects that makes this film elevates it beyond a lot of films.
And it makes it, what's really interesting about the handling of it too is that it's not, when you say elements of like learning about Clarice's backstory and stuff, we learn what's important to her, But we never find out if she's in a relationship. We never find out if like things like that are totally, what I could
personal
totally
life
see being,
is not her personal life is
and I could
completely
totally
not a
see
part of
that
this
being
film.
thrown into a movie if it was, perhaps a less talented director who's like, oh, she's got to have a boyfriend to go home to and like vent to or something.
Right.
But the movie doesn't bother itself with that. It really, I think this movie has a very laser focus on like what it's trying to do, what it's trying to say.
Yeah, I think
really works
if
in its
I'm not
favor.
mistaken, I think there were, in the writing process, there were some kind of, hints of there being a little bit of a thing with her. Is it Crawford, the FBI boss?
Yeah.
And in the, I think in the book and maybe in earlier draft of the script, I think mostly in the book there is kind of,
Sexual tension kind of
or kind of, yeah, a little bit. But I think in the book, Crawford is dealing with the death of his wife is dying, I think. And so he's under a tremendous amount of stress, and he sees something in her that I think he is attracted to. I think there's, I don't think that's really presented in this film, although you can kind of, make a couple steps of assumption and be, why is he, picked her out of everybody else?
Yeah.
Why is he focusing so much on helping her? Why is, he calls her off the obstacle course, and you've like got to come in here. He really takes her under his wing, and she is the only woman FBI agent we see in the film. And
what's funny too is
really reaches out to her.
The most flirting that she does in this movie is to get by some, like even with Lecter, like there's almost this element of like a strange transfixion of like romance between them that kind of grows by the end of the movie, where it's like maybe not like a sexual romance, but certainly this like odd mutual respect of.
Well, there's no
like
question
minds.
that Lecter. Let's talk about let's focus it on that, because I think this. I want to talk about Lecter as a character, and then I want to talk about Buffalo Bill too. But I think from a story perspective, let's talk about Lecter. I think obviously he's an extremely interesting antagonist. He's an extremely interesting character, and you're right. I think in a strange way, he actually respects Clarice more than any other of these characters.
Totally, exactly.
And he's interested in her. He listens to her. He very clearly wants to understand her history, her motivations,
and wants her to learn on her own. Like, not give her the answers, but
absolutely,
yeah.
And he clearly is affectionate for her. We even have an insert of him, grazing her finger as they pass, files between the bars.
And that's really played up in the sequels too, like the Hannibal movie that came out after this, directed by Ridley Scott, which is not good at all, but they really play up the romance elements between them. Like he's.
I'm not gonna lie, I felt that was like a tad cheesy. I felt that was a tad of a cheat. The little insert there of the finger graze.
I like that moment just because I think that moment to me is like, it's like, oh my God, she's touched like this guy that's behind these like huge plates of glass that is basically in the seventh circle of hell at the bottom of this asylum.
It writes the line.
Suddenly like he touches her and it's like, oh, he didn't kill her, like he didn't grab her. And
there's a couple moments like that, and I'm kind of on the fence. There's a couple moments like that, but yeah, so it's interesting. What else can we say about this character? There's so much. Anthony Hopkins,
even just like I think that his character is summed up in a really great line by Clarice when she says, after he escapes, and she says like, he's not going to come after me because he would consider it rude.
Right.
And I was like, that's Hannibal Lecter right there. It's like he's a serial killer. He's a sociopath. He eats people, but he cares for manners.
Is he a sociopath? So this is interesting. I don't know if he is or isn't, but this is definitely an interesting discussion.
I'd say much more so a sociopath than a psychopath to me.
Well, it seems as though he does not lack the ability to empathize in this sense, that he is absolutely able to read people and understand their human motivations, their pains, their joys. It's not that he lacks the ability to and if you look at outtakes, and again, I don't know if, is it fair to look at outtakes to kind of, discuss this movie, but I don't think that my idea of him is not that he is an unfeeling.
So that's the key difference, though,
character.
between a psychopath. This is going to be my criminology background coming up, but that's the difference between a psychopath and a sociopath. That a sociopath is able to understand and feel emotions like empathy and sympathy and things like that, but they're also able to work over those. So they're able to basically shut that off. So if Lecter were killing somebody, that you can shut that side of you off, but you're also, and that's why sociopaths are considered much more dangerous when it comes to things like this, because they can relate to, empathize with, understand human emotion. They can be, for all you know, very regular people. Like, the rate of sociopaths in society is much higher than psychopaths, because psychopaths are unable to empathize, unable to feel those things. They don't have that, development, so they're completely unable to reach that level, whereas a sociopath is much more hidden, because they are able to feel those things and elicit those emotions. And so that's, to me, why I would say, to me, Lecter's much more sociopathic than psychopathic, because he is able to elicit the empathy.
And in this story,
with Clarice and stuff.
he does so more than any other character.
Yes,
aside from
exactly.
Clarice. And he's able to understand Buffalo Bill, and he understands Clarice, and he's clear. And kind of, there's this backstory that he was a doctor.
He's a therapist.
He's a therapist and one of the best who ever did his thing. And but it's interesting. I mean, it seems to me that he has his own set of criteria and rules by which he lives, which of course we all do. His are quite extreme, and you'd mentioned that in his world, being rude is like a capital crime, and maybe it's kind of fun in that we've all felt this way. I think we've all felt this way a little bit. How many times have you been driving down the road and somebody doesn't use their blinker and cuts you off, and for like a moment you're like, you could kind of like, we've all been the victim of somebody else's rudeness. Now it's interesting, right? Because what is rudeness? Rudeness is a lack of attention, conscientiousness, or empathy toward another person. That's basically what rudeness is. So it's interesting that Dr. Lecter is actually, when he is, and actually it kind of, sets him in motion, giving Clarice information when Clarice has that really graphic interaction with the cellmate right next to, which is I pretty gruesome and gross, and I'm like, don't even know if I want to specifically outline what happens as she walks by his cell in this podcast for our younger listeners, but it definitely does involve bodily fluids being thrown on someone's face. But that extreme act of rudeness kind of, catalyzes Dr. Lecter and being like, I'm gonna help you, because you had to endure that rudeness. I'm gonna help you. At least that's the excuse he kind of uses to begin this dialogue.
And I think it's authentic. Like, at least that's my read for it, is that it is genuine. Like, that's the like you said, the catalyst.
It's the only time you see him emotional in the film,
and almost apologetic.
He is. It's the only time you see his heart rate elevate, and he's like, because you had to endure this rudeness, I'm gonna help you out.
And there's the shot too, again, of like right after that happens, that Clarice and him are mere inches apart, except for the glass that they like get. There's all the rules: don't get close to the glass, don't make eye contact, blah blah blah. And then she gets right up in his face, and it's like again, feels very much like it's at least shot in this like melodramatic romantic way, which I find very interesting of a choice to make. For
sure. I mean, they certainly are intellectually intimate. They are psychologically intimate. The's no question. I mean,
it's all subtle. It's very subtle. That's the thing.
Well, I think that it actually it gets quite obvious. I feel like really quick.
Later in the movie,
like you have her sharing with him things that about her life and her childhood that are profoundly intimate, and that most of us would have to know someone extremely well to tell someone. I mean, some of the we might not tell anybody other than our significant other, or maybe sometimes not even then. Some of these really deep, painful, foundational hurts of our childhood. This is profoundly intimate. This is profoundly psychologically and emotionally intimate. What I think is really interesting
too is that it's all under the guise of this quid pro quo. But Lecter doesn't break that, and Lecter is, almost arguably, sort of in a way, as open. Like, he doesn't reveal things from his childhood and stuff like that, but he definitely, even just handing her the towel.
He's fair.
Comes out of the rain. He's fair, and he's polite, he's gentlemanly. And that's kind of what's funny, is that, in the background of the story, there's the idea that Lecter, as many people who go on to be serial killers are, was like abused as a child and stuff like that. So there's this almost,
but we don't see this in the film.
And yeah, it's not in the film at all.
It's not in this film.
It's written into the background of the character, and it's not even mentioned at all.
Yeah.
But I do think that like looking at it with that kind of eye is interesting, because you do again get this sense of like Clarice has gone through a very different type of childhood trauma. You know, she lost her father, and then she had to go live on this farm. And
well,
that's
all these characters
Lamb's part. And, yeah,
have this kind of childhood. And
Buffalo Bill as well.
When we move to Buffalo Bill, we'll see that that's very much a part of the explanation of his character, and it's explicitly explained in the film that he had a traumatic childhood, and that has led him to be the person he is. But I mean, so yeah, you know, and then we have, like, we can kind of touch on Anthony Hopkins' performance, which, I mean, again, it's, you know, it's really what, I if I'm not mistaken, I think it was Sean Connery was the first choice for.
Yeah, he declined it.
And he declined it, and I'm like,
and Robert De Niro, Al Pacino were also, choices.
Yeah, I can't fathom him as, and of course, I don't think any of us can imagine. Like, none of us can imagine anybody other than Hopkins,
Buffalo
because
Bill
he just nailed. Yeah, awesome. Like, you know, Hopkins does such a fantastic job. But you're right. It's this very calm, very still, very refined, very elegant, very polite, very intelligent, and
borderlining on the performative too.
But well, and this is why I made the joke a little bit earlier about Silence of the Ham. There are, you know, but it works here. It absolutely works here. But yeah, I mean, Hopkins does, you know, he plays with this role. He's clearly having fun with it. And that's, I mean, look, it's great to see. And clearly it's a fan favorite. People love it. And it's, you know, it's wonderful. But he does.
And I think too, I think one of the reasons it works so well in the character is that it feels more like Lecter is hamming it up than Hopkins. Like, it feels like Lecter is putting on this performance for Clarice.
I think that's a great note. I think you're absolutely right. I think it completely fits. Hopkins does such a wonderful job embodying this character that you're absolutely right. It feels like this is Lecter. And yeah, that's a great point. And I feel like that it's such a fine line. And it could have, I think, in the hands of a lesser actor, it could have absolutely seemed like the actor being performative, as
Brian
opposed
Cox
to the character.
In Manhunter, I think doesn't hold a candle to Hopkins because of that.
Yeah.
Brian Cox in Manhunter is playing a villain. He's playing somebody who's like
the little, like, finger.
Yeah, like he sits in the cell and is like, well, Mr. Crawford, if you want your answers, I'll give, like, it's
a Bond
like
villain,
really,
like a
really,
Bond villain.
Yeah, no, and it feels like that. It's really cheesy. It's really, you know, again, and
he's got
I'm
a
big
cat
fan
in
of
his
Michael
lap.
Mann. Not a really big fan of Manhunter because a lot of it just, again, is so over the top. Whereas again, like you said in this one, you know, Hopkins lives in that much in the same way that Foster, what an incredible perfect storm of two actors who are just brilliant. You know, Jodie Foster is one of my favorite actors of all time. I think she's just
extremely intelligent
actor,
actor,
fantastic
absolutely.
actor,
Yeah,
who does the work, who is one of those actors that like every director dreams to work with because she brings so much to the page. And brings so, and you know, listening to the conversations that she and Demme had on the production of this are just incredible, because it's one of those things where it's like, you know, again, every director dreams to work with an actor who fully understands the ins and outs of a character.
Well, I know she had a lot of input in the production. I mean, she made, you know, just an example. I mean, she, you know, you hear her talk about the opening scene, and originally as it was written, you know, they wanted basically to have this kind of little bit of a teaser where, you know, she's you know, I feel, I'm trying to remember exactly, but basically it's like, you know, she's like hunting down a bad guy. She's like hunting down a bad guy, and it's like, terrorist or something, and you know, and she shoots the person, or she makes a mistake and shoots someone else. I can't remember exactly, but basically a real action oriented scene where she's gunning somebody down, and then, you know, cut, haha, surprise, it was a training scenario. So we kind of have this little bit of a, you know, of a fake out, and but it's kind of a much more action-oriented scene, and she's like, you know, I don't want to go that route. That's not the kind of character that I want to represent here, and that's exactly what you talked about, Cullen, that she didn't want to be just another action-oriented heroine here. And she's like, no, I want to have her in this obstacle course that we show her, you know, doing her thing. And
it's not subtle. Like literally, the first shot of the movie is her climbing up a hill.
Absolutely,
because it's an uphill. But I think that sometimes subtlety can be overrated in that way too. Like I don't mind a movie wearing.
There's definitely not a lot. There's a lot of things that aren't subtle in this film, but that do
and there's
work.
a lot that are and a lot that aren't. That's what I think is so interesting. Like why I like examining this movie and why I've seen it so many times. And so I pretty much watch it once a year. Because to me, it's there's so much subtle in the character work and the subtlety and I would say like really deep analysis and the psychology of these characters. But at the same time, like you said, a lot of the choices are also worn on the sleeve. A lot of it is very out in the open, very cheesy, very hammy, which is fun. It makes it a lot of fun.
And it's fun for me to talk about it with you, to see it through your eyes, because again, like it's been probably 15 years at least since I've seen the film. I've only seen it a couple times. It is not on my list of films that I watch with any frequency, and I've not spent a lot of time in thought about it or discussion of it. And so it's fun for me. I always love doing that, to watch another, to kind of see a film through another person's eyes who's a huge fan of that film, because almost always, like way more often than not, I end up leaving those conversations with a lot more appreciation for the film. So it's fun for me, because my goal is always to love. I mean, look, I wish I loved every single film I saw, right? I mean, that's the whole, when I sit down to watch a film, my hope is that I will absolutely love it. So, that's what I'm always looking for. I don't ever want to watch a film to hate it, Let's talk a little bit about Buffalo Bill then.
Yeah. James Gum is his real name, but Ted Levine plays him.
Yes.
Who I think is I really love not in a ton of movies, but I think when he's in a
great
movie,
character actor,
steals the scenes that he's in. He's such I dream to work with Ted Levine.
Ted, if you're listening.
Ted, come be in my thing. But no, I think that, Ted Levine to me is somebody, just to talk about him for just a brief moment, and then to get into Buffalo Bill, but somebody that commands attention. Like if you want to talk about an actor that is so, he doesn't, again, very different from the style of character that Lecter is, or that the style that Hopkins plays Lecter in, which is very subtle, or not subtle, but very well thought, very methodical, still very haunting. Buffalo Bill in so many ways is the opposite of that. Is impulsive. He's dogmatic. He's desperate, and I love that about Ted Levine's characterization of him, where it's like even the lines that the few lines that Ted Levine has in the movie, he always seems unsure of whether he's saying them, like not in an acting sense, but just the character itself always feels like every time he speaks that he's not sure if he said the right thing or not.
Well, the thing that sticks out to me most, right? So as someone who hasn't spent a lot of time studying this film, I mean, right off the bat, and it was something that I instantly remembered being really affected by when I first saw the film, is his voice. To the point where I was literally like, is this actor's voice? Like, what are they doing here? I'm like, is this a Christian Bale Batman thing? Or is this like, I mean, he has one of the creepiest voices in that film I have ever heard.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, and it's so impressionable. Like me and my friends will almost always, just do the line, oh wait, is she a great big fat lady? Or like, put the lotion in the basket.
Everybody else.
I've written sketches about this character just because of how he delivers the line. But again, one of those things that is so, like, for somebody, I think it's so funny that, like, the two probably most quotable characters in this movie have the least screen time. Like, they've got, Hopkins, I think, has, like, max 15 minutes. Ted Levine probably has, like, 7 minutes of screen time.
And it's what we take away from the whole film.
Yeah, it's because they're so good at what they do.
It's
and they're
juicy.
So,
I mean,
he really lives in that role, I think, and the physicality and everything about it is just, like, I don't know. It's hard to explain something. It's like when you say like that sometimes movies just work. Sometimes characters just work too, and you kind of like, it's so hard to pinpoint exactly what is so good about them. But so Ted Levine, so what did you? I'm actually curious to know what you think after so many years of seeing it. Of like what. Because I've heard a lot of people say that it is, again, a very, like, it's a borderline, almost comedic performance.
Well, I mean, there definitely is comedy to it. One of the things that's challenging is that, so by now, right, the film is something different than what it was in 1991. The reason being that this film did have such a cultural impact it has been parodied, satirized. It's been, it's inspired films. It's, I mean, so many. It's you take all of that baggage with you into the viewing of the film now. So there is, I think, there are some comedic elements to the film when watching it now, just because it's permeated our culture. It's been parodied so much that you can't help but to bring some of those memories into the film when you watch it now. And I can't put myself back in 1991. I don't recall it feeling comedic in 1991, but I do definitely get a sense that there is some comedy. And I think the film in some ways is a little, clearly it was ripe for parody because it was parodied so much. And I think some of that is that, so many of these performances really ride that line. So it's kind of ripe for parody. It's like Hopkins really rides that razor thin line. Buffalo Bill as a character really rides that line. So,
I call it brie cheese.
Yeah.
Which is like that. It's like really good cheese.
I
like
love that.
That it's not cheesy in the way that's bad.
It's
like
good cheese. Really, it's not Velveeta. It's brie. Yeah.
And so, and I think kind of what you said as well, which is that I too, when I first watched this movie, didn't think it was comedic at all. It's thrilling, it's suspenseful, it's psychological and dark and stuff like that. And then it wasn't until I think probably the first time I really found myself like laughing out loud at some of the moments, and because they're so just like rich with well, and
like certainly Dr. Chilton is. I mean, his character is just like. He's like a polyester suit wearing lounge lizard. Like, I mean, his character is so over the top too. It's I think it's funny. I mean, in 1991, was it funny? I don't know, but I look at it now in 2021 and I'm like,
oh God, yeah, he's so
laughing.
Sleazy. Yeah.
I mean,
and what I think is so funny too is that the only character to me, the only male character really that's like comforting is Barney, who is the one of the guards that kind of is in that little airlock room between I think it's actually a really interesting choice to have that character even in the movie at all, because there's something about that. I don't remember what the actor's name is.
It's like the last line of defense of humanity before you
see that guy and you're like, I bet he gives the best hugs.
Well, that's what I mean.
So
he's like the last line of humanity before you step into this underworld, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we're going to talk about this in a minute too, but that, the production design of that jail cell is far from realistic. That is not a realistic looking holding cell. Come on. There's a reason why it looks like a dungeon, just like Buffalo Bill's basement. Look, that's also pretty unrealistic that someone's basement would look like that. Although more realistic in some like East Coast areas. But I mean, I think, look, it would be remiss if we didn't bring this thing up. I think it's important. Now, generally, we don't go too far into kind of, discussions of like the politics of a film and things like that. But I think this is important. And it was something, that in 91, this would not have stood out to me, but it definitely stood out to me in 2021, is that, the representation of transgender people in Buffalo Bill. And, I think that's important. I think, especially if people can have, I've listened to a handful of YouTube videos of analysis around this subject about this film
from trans people as well, which is
absolutely, which is where I've been, I'm trying to listen to trans voices about this, and I absolutely can see, and I mean, especially in the context of when this film came out, where there were very few, if any, positive trans role models in media, representations in media. And so, I mean, I absolutely can see how this would have been just one more, negative representation on the pile of all these negative representations of trans people in media. And, to me, it seems to me that, it's a big part of how they tried to make Buffalo Bill seem like a dangerous like an alien outside
weird.
And
I think what's
character
also really interesting
was that his
Sorry,
and
go ahead.
And I was just going to say it. I mean, they do speak to it directly in the film, but even in the way they speak to it, still I don't think lets the film off the hook. Now, it's a product of its time, and so it's And it's good to see that it illustrates, I hope, the progress that we're making for other people and other voices. But I mean, they do kind of, and I've heard some people say, well, look, they speak to it in the film, and they say he's not truly a transgender person, which I'm like, I don't even know what that.
But
really
I was going to mention that
means.
Too, because that to now is such a big hot topic. Is like,
does that help anything? I don't think that helps. Like,
who
the
can
film's
identify
case.
As trans?
Right.
Yeah.
And not only that, but it's like trans people are what I forget the exact. I'm not going to get this right verbatim, but that they're actually gentle and subdued, or that somehow you can categorize an entire group of people as this one way.
Yeah.
And so there's a handful of places in there where I feel like, it illustrates, I think, an older point of view in these films, and so I think it's just important to note, that I feel
and obviously, in case it's not clear, neither me nor Clark are trans, so obviously we can't. The best that we can really do is listen to other, and
right.
If anyone who's watching would like to actually do further research, one of the videos that I sent over to Clark, who I think you actually said you'd seen.
First
before,
of all, if you're watching, I'll be a little sgered, because that means you're outside my window right now,
geez.
and that would feel weird. But if you're listening,
you're in my walls.
If
you're listening and you want to kind of follow up on that, there's a really interesting video by ContraPoints that goes through basically the entire mythology of like trans people in media and books, films, television, which I think, and of course,
well worth a watch.
A trans woman, so a direct, primary source of knowledge from that, and of course, again, just like any community, the trans community is not a monolith. There are some trans people who say that there's no issue with Silence of the Lambs, just as there's some people who say that it should be banned. No community is a monolith, so there's going to be a very, diverse
a whole range
opinion
of perspectives.
set.
Absolutely.
But I think what's important is just, again, like you said, listening and you don't have to. I think what I think is a really good point that ContraPoints makes is that, like, you don't have to hate a movie to just because it's got dated politics in it, but what you can do is you can just learn. Watch it with that lens.
Absolutely.
We know nowadays how differently trans people are identified in just culture, in not only pop culture but just society, and how they're seen, how they're portrayed is so radically different today, in a lot of good ways, that you can kind of go back to these things, and again, using the modern lens that we have, watch the movie and sort of go, okay, yeah, that would definitely be done differently today. And I think, one of the things that I think honestly would even help this movie, and it's such a simple change, would be having just one moment with an actual trans person that Clarice goes and talks to, or something like that. And so you get just, again, this idea of like, okay, here's a voice from someone who is actually, and again, that's another thing that really comes up in the movie's discourse, is like, when the word actually trans, is said, or like that, that Buffalo Bill is not a real trans person. And again, that's such a hot topic of debate today, of like, what makes someone really trans versus not? Does it have to be a medical diagnosis, or can it be mental? Can it be something that, someone just feels like they are a woman? Does that make them as, so yeah, very much a hot
obviously
topic
a topic you could get into a great deal of detail
answers,
about, but yeah,
I think it's good to
interesting to note
to
as we look at the film. And so speaking of looking at the film, let's talk a little bit about how the film looks. Ooh, did you see what I did there? Wasn't that fancy? So
just like the people are looking in through our windows watching us right now.
So exactly. So, a handful of things jump out to me. The first thing that really jumped out to me was, holy crap, these close-ups into the camera. I mean, wow, that stood out to me.
Yeah, so I love them. So I don't know if you like or
dislike
them.
I don't dislike. And you kind of, you know that I kind of, well, maybe you don't. We've talked about, again, like wide versus longer lenses, and getting up in people's faces and using close-ups and things. So I'm not fundamentally against close-ups at all. It was just something that really stood out to me. It was a personal choice, obviously, that the cinematographer and Demme chose to shoot in this way. It is certainly, I think it does a couple things for me. I mean, one, you really get a sense that you're in Clarice's shoes. So many of her conversations with these other characters, the characters are darn near looking straight into the barrel. Like they are.
Oh, they are in many cases.
In many cases, it's right. It's like they are looking right into camera, which is usually a major no-no. And it's like, I mean, it's, from top of head to like not even the bottom of their chin. I mean, it's like extreme close up on their face, almost.
And what
I
I think is so brilliant about that, though, and why I really like it, is because the movie almost makes it a part of its storytelling.
Oh, it
so
does.
It doesn't stand out.
No, it's throughout the whole film.
It might at the beginning kind of be like, oh, that's an interesting way to shoot that, but then because it happens so frequently and because it's it really works, I think. And Tak Fujimoto, who is the cinematographer for it, I think he, even just the way that he, like, I really appreciate his work, especially in this, because he's one of those cinematographers that I think kind of strikes the perfect balance between naturalistic lighting and heightened kind of old Hollywood style lighting.
Yeah.
And like that really subjective kind of, perhaps even kind of gearing into the expressionistic style. But again, I think that he really strikes a really fine line between them that really works. And that very much relates to not only the lighting, but as we were talking about, the way that dialogue is shot, the way that conversations are shot, and that you feel so much. And I mentioned this. I don't know if I mentioned this while we were recording, if it was prior to the recording, but that this movie is first person, both in the literal and figurative sense.
Oh, it very much is.
In that, like, people are constantly looking directly at camera, directly at the audience.
Yeah, we see this whole film from Clarice's perspective. There's no question, which is a big difference from the book.
From a storytelling standpoint, you as well. And I think that... But again, another really interesting thing that is probably a little bit more subtle than the like directly down the barrel shots, is that Demme was really Demme and Fujimoto were both really conscious to shoot every single dialogue scene differently, so that they did not rely on just shot
over the shoulder, two
shoulder,
shot.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They really made a conscious effort to make it feel as Clarice is feeling every time she's talking to someone. Not only is she getting new information, but she's in a new setting, she's in a new place,
new character.
Let's bring this up so that no two dialogue scenes in this movie look the same. I think that it's one of those,
which is challenging, which is really challenging. I mean, that it sounds maybe simple, but anybody out there who's ever shot, just which of course, I mean,
two people at a table talking, it can
the
be
bulk
very
of a
difficult
film, the bulk of a film is often two people talking, right, or maybe two or three people talking, and it's, if you watch especially television, but if you watch, I mean, sometimes 80% of a show, of a TV show or a film, might be over the shoulder, two shot, over the shoulder, two shot.
Especially in dramas like this.
Especially in dramas, and especially in TV, and so we get really used to it. And it's an efficient way to shoot in a timely sense. And certainly, it's often, there's nothing wrong with it, but to modify that, to change that, to find different ways to shoot that, it's difficult, and to not have it be obtrusive, and to not, it's still serving the story, right? And it's not distracting from the story. It's tough.
Speaking of that too, distracting, like being obtrusive with camera work and stuff. I also kind of want to mention the longer Steadicam takes in this movie.
Right.
I think that
the one
a little bit of pretense. Paul Thomas Anderson, who I think is a really brilliant
pretense
director.
Or pretext?
Pretext, not pretense.
but yes. There, a Freudian slip. I suppose, you can certainly have a lot of pretense in a oneer.
But so
great.
So a little bit of pretext though on that kind of, this idea is that Paul Thomas Anderson is a huge fan of Jonathan Demme, so much so that he dedicated his previous movie Phantom Thread to Demme after he passed away.
Oh, that's right. I had forgotten that.
You can really see Demme's influence on Anderson in his earlier work. Less so Hard Eight, because I think that he had less.
Didn't have the money.
And yes, didn't have the money. But in Boogie Nights and in Magnolia especially, you see Anderson really loves those long one. Like, most of the scenes in that movie are just one or
super.
And so a lot of people love those movies. I'm more of a fan of PTA's later work, because I think he really brings that back and becomes less overstated. But the reason I'm mentioning that is because I think it's a really great example of bringing attention to a shot like PTA does, and kind of almost using it to show off your skills as a director, versus in Silence of the Lambs, and the way Demme handles these long takes on Steadicam, that they're hidden. that they serve the story, and that so one, perhaps one of the more famous examples of it is when they're heading down to Lecter's cell for the first time, and Chitlin is bringing Clarice down, and it's not entirely one take. There's a few cuts, but it's very long. It's a strung out scene of very long takes of them walking, and but you don't feel it. You don't feel like it's long takes because you're walking with them, and it serves the story because you're realizing that, again, kind of like I mentioned earlier, that this guy is literally in the seventh circle of hell.
Yeah.
That there are walls and doors and gates and bars and everything that's going, and you're walking down into this depths of these dungeons, and that, on the upper floors of the asylum, that all the walls are white and they're newly painted, and then you get down to this stone dungeon that looks like it barely has running water, and again, I think that's really interesting, and again, it's one of those choices that's like, it serves the story. It the choice to make those long wanders, or in the moment
they're very
where
seamless.
one of the first times that you see Buffalo Bill's full basement is a oneer going through and following a moth and following his moth collection, and then it goes and rushes by Buffalo Bill as he's sewing his skin suit, and then goes down the stairs into the well. And again, why that works so well and why that's so effective, and also doesn't feel like it's Demme showing off, and is hardly even really recognizable as a oneer, is because it's setting up the geography for the scene, so that later on when Clarice is trapped down there, we know, holy shit, this place is like a labyrinth, this place is like a maze, and I think that's such a really great way to establish geography in a scene like that, when that geography is going to be so vital later on.
Absolutely, and it also tells us so much about the character, though. In a funny, strange way, it reminds me a lot about the opening shot of Back to the Future, where you've got this long tracking shot, and we are learning so much about Marty and Doc and their relationship, and who are they and what are they doing, and all these kind of. It tells us the history about the town and the clock tower. I mean, history of Doc getting the plutonium. It's actually an extraordinary shot, and just so much exposition and so much character. We learn so much about the characters, but in a way, I feel like that shot you just described is like that 4 hour for Buffalo Bill. We learned about the geography, but we also learned so much about him and the visual density of the things that we're seeing as we explore his geography.
Yeah.
So
so I mean, and then it comes down to editing too. The editing in this movie, I think, is really, a masterwork in how. Again, I always kind of reference the scenes that like go into dream sequences or memories or flashbacks for Clarice.
Yeah.
But they're not done in a typical, close up of someone's face, and then she goes and thinks about, and it's all, you get like the white outline of like smoky fogginess, and but no, it's done in a way that, I think that, to me, this movie has the most authentic memory in the world, in any movie, in that I mean, that it feels like this movie does a really good job, especially with the editing, of putting you into feeling like you actually are remembering something, because what it'll do is it'll like pick up on hints of things that that remind Clarice of something, and then so for example, she sees the police car drive by, and then it cuts to a shot of a police car driving by and her watching a police car drive by as a kid, and her dad pull up, and that's how you get into that memory. It
just gets right to it.
Or the point at the funeral home when she's walking up to, like, as an adult, walking up to this coffin, and you don't know, for the entire scene, is that POV shot of the coffin her as a kid, or is that POV shot of the coffin her as an adult, and then it cuts to a reverse of her as a kid? Really brilliantly done in terms of just like feeling like that's what memories to me feel like. That's how I think people remember things and have these flashbacks in real life.
And I think that works so well in this film because it's shot so strongly from her POV, from that character's perspective, from beginning to end.
Yeah.
And I think that decision to do that really sets up the ability to put together these flashback or memory scenes, like you're saying, as well as they are. And you're right, it's handled better than most films handle this kind of thing. Absolutely. And let's talk a little bit about, set design. I think we've mentioned this quite a bit, but I think there's some really interesting, not necessarily realistic, but so effective at establishing a feeling, whether that's the holding cell that Lecter is in, Buffalo Bill's home, and the basement in which he does his horrific, unspeakable acts. I mean, it really it kind of transcends necessarily the realistic. It does such an extraordinary job of setting up the feeling of these characters
And it does, and again, it feels very appropriate for the world of the film.
you buy it. You buy
Yeah,
it.
exactly.
You
Like, you're
buy
not
it.
like, I at least for me, whenever I'm watching this movie, I don't, even though those cells that like Heck Lecter and Miggs and all the other dangerous people are in would never exist in real life. That's not how they would.
Highly
Yeah.
unlikely, right? Yeah.
But it's still, it almost feels like these guys are beyond evil, beyond what we have in
It does
real
a
life.
great
So
job
you
of that,
need
right?
to, yeah.
They're
you
not
know,
regular criminals. These are
Yeah.
not regular, like, this is not a regular jail, and these aren't regular criminals. It's like you said it. It's like they're like going down, you're like going down to the seventh level. Yes, I mean, you're like, you're stepping into hell. And once you cross that threshold, you're in a different world.
And even
And
just like the lighting in that scene when she goes into that is just stark red.
yes,
It's completely red light, and again, kind of going along, just a little bit of a different topic, but this, like, even the sound design in that scene when they get down there, they put submarine sound effects so that it felt like you were in this like deep
in the
depth
depths
of something.
There's some great stuff with sound design,
Yeah,
and I
really,
I,
really
I
wonderful sound
wanted to
design.
I want to examine that in a second because that is a great point. There's some really interesting stuff here. Let's talk about but real briefly though, as we wrap up kind of the look of the film and things. Some other things that I noticed I felt like were really interesting. How the film handles gore. And like body horror, and there is some of that here. There's definitely some kind of horror aspects. There's definitely some gruesome stuff going on. Aside from the body in the morgue, a lot of the ways that the film shows us the nature of Buffalo Bill's crimes is that it gives us kind of like a degree of separation to help us, I think, digest that violence, and that is by showing us his what the damage that he's done to these human bodies by having that in photographs in the film.
Yes.
So that
Yeah.
we're not actually looking at the body itself. We're not actually looking at a representation of a representation. So it's kind of a degree removed, and it's an interesting choice by the director, but it certainly helps. It allows us to see the gruesome nature of this person's crimes, of this character's crimes, but it removes it a little bit from us so that it's not like a pure horror film, right? It's not what a horror film would do. A horror film would get right in there and show us the actual body. So it's definitely one of the decisions that keeps this more in the thriller drama realm as opposed to
and even
horror.
even the moment in the morgue, I would say the close-ups of the body are forensic. They're not necessarily like gore. It's not like going in on the knife wound or whatever. It's very
it's very procedural, matter of fact. They're there, right, giving it's a very clinical kind of situation.
and again, in very much going along with that, kind of, again, to kind of bridge the gap between the visuals and the audio. That the way that gore is spoken about too is very clinical. It's very, so like one of the scenes that really stands out to me is when they're in the little kind of turboprop single engine plane or whatever, and because it's so loud in this space that you have Crawford showing Clarice these photos of the set or sorry, not the set, I hope not photos of the set, but photos of the body, and as he's saying this, he has to shout it at her because they're in this loud plane. And so it's like so funny to me that, like, and it's such an odd thing to have these like gory details shouted at you.
Yeah.
And to have them like, that he's like, the body was found over here and it had 6 pieces of its skin cut out, blah, blah, blah.
The sound design, I mean, there's a lot of that in this film.
Yeah.
So, and you'd noted, with Howard Shore's score, the score doesn't really do much in a traditional kind of horror or thriller sense to highlight these really heightened scary moments, right? The sound design does. We have things like you just described. We have the roar of this turboprop plane requiring that the gruesome details be yelled to the protagonist. We have other areas where when Hannibal Lecter is in the hangar and he's talking to the senator whose daughter Buffalo Bill has kidnapped, just coincidentally, as Hannibal Lecter is really digging in to the senator and pressing her emotional button, there's a jet engine that rises and rises and rises in volume as it spools up. We have, the barking dog sounds in Buffalo Bill's dungeon.
And Goodbye Horses, which is
Yeah.
one of my favorite scenes in the movie. Yeah.
And it's right. And we have, it's this cacophony of barking and screaming and jets and airplane motors and even bird sounds, which is really kind of a fun thing given Clarice's last name. And even Lecter makes a little bit of a pun about her last name. And so we've got the hawks, and I'm pretty sure everybody in every movie that's ever used a hawk sound has used that same hawk sound, I think.
No, and I think that it's really interesting, and especially that you mentioned the music. I love the score for this movie as well. And in case you couldn't tell, I love everything with this movie. But but I think that the score is really brilliant too, because like you said, it's not a horror movie score. Like even when Clarice is getting up in the like storage lot, and normally that would be very scary. You'd have strings, and she'd be looking around this dark storage container, and she'd find the head, and
yeah, right.
But no, it doesn't do that. It's Howard Shore has spoken about it, and he said that his goal for the movie wasn't to make the soundtrack for the movie. He was to make the soundtrack for Clarice's mind.
Yeah.
And so that when she sees in the very opening scene, when she's in Crawford's office and she's looking at the wall of bodies, that the music is empathetic. It's not scary, because Clarice has empathy for these people. Clarice wants to help them. She's not scared of this. She might be frightened by it and worried and kind of intimidated, but the ultimate thing that keeps driving her forward is the empathy and
to help.
The drive to save these people.
Right.
And so I think that's really interesting with that the film soundtrack doesn't, you could listen to it. And there's of course, like, it's not like a happy soundtrack. It's not, romantic. It's definitely got an eerie feel to it, but it's
unsettling.
If you were to listen to it, I don't think that you would immediately point at a serial killer movie and go like, which is also, interesting that because Howard Shore also did the soundtrack for Seven, which is completely different. That soundtrack is all like grinding gears and creepy, sounds like bugs jittering and lots of strings, and it's very scary, very dramatic, completely different than this. And Seven, very much a movie that, perhaps as we looked at, perhaps, was very inspired by, if not indirectly, by Silence of the Lambs. So it's interesting that the scores for those two movies are two completely different sounds and two completely different feelings.
And likewise, Psycho, which is another film that you, of course, could very easily
relates to the trans element too of cross-dressing, and
it does.
Cross-dressing and trans are two different things, but it still hypes up that stereotype of like a cross-dressing killer.
Yeah, absolutely, it does. So definitely some comparisons, and it's kind of this film sits time-wise in between those two. I mean, and you'd even, there's definitely a fascination in American culture, and therefore, of course, in our films, this fascination with serial killers. Mm-hmm. And of course, that extends to this film as well. And I think that's very interesting. And, I think we see some moments here. It's kind of interesting with a little bit of the production design where this film kind of speaks to that. That obsession, or that almost celebritization, I don't know if that's a word. If it isn't, I just made it up, of serial killers. And, Buffalo Bill kind of representing an amalgam of several serial killers. And we see, American flags everywhere, and kind of...
even at one point draped over like a head,
basically,
head.
Right, that Clarice finds in the storage unit. So it's, certainly there is this fascination. Of course, I think it's easy to understand the fascination, because it speaks to such an extreme part of the human condition that, it would hard to not be fascinated in a way that you want to try to understand how can a human being exhibit this kind of behavior. So I, at least, I think most people find it fascinating in that way. I guess there's also that sometimes we're fascinated by gruesome things that are far outside of our own daily lives. And so somewhat like, driving by a car crash, you're kind of compelled to look. at such a rare, hopefully rare, piece of kind of gruesome scene, but
Yeah.
it's interesting. It's really been fun to discuss the film and hear your perspective on it as somebody who, as somebody who really adores this film. I find that it's increased my appreciation of it. And maybe I'll go back and watch it again after this conversation. But it's been really enjoyable, and
it's been a lot of fun. Yeah.
I've had a blast, man, as I always do. It's not like I don't think I've ever ended one of these conversations and been like, well, Cullen, boy, that stank. That was a waste. That was a waste of an hour. Yeah, it's like,
the
hey,
old ball and chain.
That's what keeps us coming back for more. It's always fun. So yeah, with that being said, Cullen, thank you so much for spending this hour with me discussing this film.
Thanks.
And I'll be excited to see what we choose to do next time as we explore different films outside of just the realm of Werner Herzog. We'll continue that trend. But until next time, everybody, thanks so much for hanging out with us. Thanks so much for listening to us. We hope you've enjoyed it. We will see you next time.
Bye-bye.